I don't enjoy the rides anymore, and I'll save the rest of those stories for later. As you see, we have the communion table set up this morning, and we will get there at the end of the service. We will partake of the communion table, the bread and the juice, and remembering Christ's body and His blood. But before we get there, I wanted us to remember and connect the dots. Remember just a week or two ago when we were looking at Mark, Jesus shared the last Passover dinner that He would share with the disciples, and He reinterpreted it into the first communion, the first Lord's Supper. And I want us to, this morning, take a few minutes and remember make the connection to the Passover. And so we're going to look at Exodus chapter 12 in just a minute. You can go ahead and turn there if you wish, Exodus chapter 12. And like I said, I want us to connect the dots because Jesus reinterprets the Passover meal. And so we need to understand what was going on. What was the Passover meal about? Why was He reinterpreting it? And before we get there, I want you to hear this quote by a theologian I found this week. And I want you to know, I got very excited as I was studying this week. And sometimes that's dangerous because, the pastor I only have so many minutes and I study all week. So this morning, I've already taken one whole page of notes out of my sermon because there was no way we were going to make it. So I do want you to hear this quote, though, from this guy named Tidball. He says, throughout history, Israel's exodus from Egypt has been an inspiring symbol of evolution and people seeking emancipation. It was employed by Oliver Cromwell and the English radicals who overthrew Stuart oppression. It was owned by the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s in America and adopted widely as a motif by liberation theologians in Latin America. The transformation of the sovereign action of God on behalf of Israel into a common metaphor for any movement towards freedom, however, is dangerous, Tidball says. He says, too often people want the Exodus without the Passover, liberation without the blood, salvation without the sacrifice, and freedom without the cross. And I think that's true. I think we've movements. And so I want us to look back at the Passover this morning, and I want you to see it for all of its bloody sacrifice. Because that's the whole point, right? The Passover happens because the blood was smeared on the doorpost. And so let's look at the text. The text is long. That's why we didn't have a scripture reading at the beginning of the service to save time for... I'm not going to read the entire chapter. Actually, if you've already turned there, you're already freaking out probably because you realize that there is 51 verses in the chapter 12. But part of it has to do with in the middle, has to do with the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is connected to the Passover, but I'm not going to spend time on it, so I'm going to skip those verses. If you look at Exodus chapter 12, let's start in verse 1. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, this month is to be the beginning of months for you. It is the first month of your year. Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month they must each select an animal of the flock according to their father's households, one animal per household. If the household is too small for a whole animal, that person and the neighbor nearest his house are to select one based on the combined number of people. You should apportion the animal according to what each person will eat. You must have an unblemished animal, a year-old male. You may take it from either the sheep or the goats. You are to keep it until the 14th day of this month. Then the whole assembly of the community of Israel will slaughter the animals at twilight. They must take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and the lintel of the houses where they eat them. They are to eat the meat that night. They should eat it roasted over the fire along with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Do not eat any of it raw or cooked in boiling water, but only roasted over fire, its head as well as its legs and inner organs. Do not let any of it remain until morning. You must burn up any part of it that does remain before morning. Here is how you must eat it. You must be dressed for travel, your sandals on your feet and your staff in your hand. You are to eat it in hurry. And listen to this phrase. We're going to come back to it. It is the Lord's Passover. I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night and strike every firstborn male in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. I am Yahweh. I will execute judgments. Just right there, I just mentioned, some people want to attribute some evil force to the judgment that's about to happen. I've been told before that God will not judge. I've been told specifically that Jesus Christ won't judge. Brothers and sisters, if you think that, you have simply not read. Yes, I am Yahweh. I will execute judgments against all the gods of Egypt. The blood of on the houses where you are staying will be a distinguishing mark for you that Yahweh is doing the acting. This day is to be a memorial for you, and you must celebrate it as a festival to the Lord. You are to celebrate it throughout your generations as a permanent statute. Now I'm going to skip down to verse 21 and continue. Then Moses summoned the lintel and the 2 doorposts with some of the blood in the basin. None of you may go out the door of his house until morning. You see, the protection is inside the house under the blood, so you're not to leave the house. When the Lord passes through to strike Egypt and sees the blood on the lintel and the 2 doorposts, He will pass over the door and not let the destroyer enter your houses to strike you. Keep this command permanently as a statute for you and your descendants. When you enter the land that the Lord will give you as He promised, you are to observe this ritual. When your children ask you, what does this ritual mean to you? You are to reply, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord. I had initially planned on trying to make this more dramatic and having Mr. Daniel stand up at the beginning of the service and ask, what does this table mean? But I was behind this week because I took the front week of the week off, and so it didn't happen. So, but the point is, the children are asking, what does this ritual